everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Unfiltered. Now, this week we're joined by someone who's here to share his experience of grief and a sudden loss, but hopefully inspire people and motivate people to know that it's not just a negative thing, it's positive out of the negative experience. It's Jason. Hi, Jason. Nice to meet you.
Hello, nice to meet you as well. Thank you for having me on.
Before we get into your story, I've just got a couple of get to know you questions, if that's okay.
Okay.
So your first one is, if you could trade lives with a person or a character for a day, who would it be and why?
Oh wow, that's almost a loaded question. Probably a superhero, and my favorite superhero would probably be Batman, and more for the fact that the man that's behind Batman's wealthy and owns a corporation versus being a vigilante.
Right, your next one is, if you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what food would it be?
Oh, I'm a big fan of burgers, so I mean now I might be 500 pounds by the end of my life, but probably burgers.
If you could speak to one species of animal, what species would you like to speak to and why?
Mine's pretty simple, probably cats, just because, yeah, in fact, my wife and I like yesterday had this conversation because we're trying to decide if we want a cat or a dog. And I said the difference between dogs and cats is when you get home with the dog, he wants to see you. When you get home with the cat, he could care less whether you walked in the door or not. Um, so probably cats just to figure out what their indifference is.
Obviously, this episode's on YouTube, so it's online. So what's the most craziest or wildest thing you've seen online lately?
Oh, it depends on what direction you want to go with that. Honestly, it's a lot of. I'm primarily on social media a lot, and a lot of the wild stuff I see is just humanity acting at its worst. Honestly, I mean, a lot of the things I see is just the audacity of people. Like recently, there was in the states, there was um, it was a Frontier airline or Spirit airline staff that was just giving this customer holy hell for some weird reason. Now, subsequently after that, when the video went wild, the airline fired the two people. But that's probably the wildest and that's probably the wildest thing I've seen, which is probably pretty bland to most people.
And it's a double-edged sword with social media, isn't it? Because we wouldn't be able to have this conversation and
Hmm.
people wouldn't be able to watch it if it wasn't for social media. But then, like you said, it sort of seems to bring out the worst in people as well.
Yeah, definitely. And when I'm old enough that I was a kid before the internet. And so,
Yeah.
the running joke these days is we used to think the reason why people weren't smart enough was because they didn't have access to information. And now we look back and go, nope, that wasn't the issue.
Very true. And last question for this segment. I don't know if you ever plan to or you have, but if you was to write an autobiography, what would the title be called?
Oh, that's simple. It would be called, Well, That Didn't Go as Planned.
That's a brilliant title. Well, Jason, like we said in the intro, you've suffered grief and sudden loss. Do you want to go into your story and explain what's happened?
Sure. So I'm a married father of two kids with multiple physical and mental disabilities. I've been married, this year is 22 years I'll be married. Um, so when my wife and I met, I was 26, she was 29. We were older in the sense of we just weren't in our young 20s when we got married. So we got married. We were married for about a year, and then we decided we wanted to start reasonably quickly having a family. And my wife got pregnant pretty quickly. Everything was fine. Everything was normal until the week 20 appointment, which for anybody that's had kids understands that's where you find out the sex of the child. Um, and so we got into that appointment, and I wanted to know the sex of our child, and my wife did not. And I only wanted to know because I was the one that was putting the nursery together and all that stuff. So I wanted to kind of cater it to whatever we were having. And we were playing back and forth. But before we could finish and like make our answer, the ultrasound tech said, I need to know the sex of the child because I've found an issue. And so immediately at that point, when you hear that, you go, well, what's the sex of our child? And we were having a boy. And we said, and I asked the tech, I said, what's the issue? And she looks at me and says, well, that's kind of a doctor relayed issue. I said, okay, I understand that. I said, well, why did you need to know whether it was a boy or a girl? And she looks back at me and said, well, if it's what I think it is, it's rare in boys, but even rarer in girls. And I said, okay, then. So from week 20 all the way through week 38, which is when my wife gave birth, we had to see what they call a perinatologist, which is basically a high risk OBGYN is all that is. And through the next several weeks, they told us every terrible scenario you can think of what was going to happen to our child uh, after he was born. 90% of it was didn't happen. There was about 10% of it that actually did happen. But my son, we didn't know that he was going to be born with a rare condition until literally the day he was born. We had
Well,
no idea that he was going to be born with the condition. So my wife had our son, they wrapped him up in the OR. We saw him for about 30 seconds and then they took him to the NICU at the hospital we were in. So my wife went to recovery, and I went up to the NICU, and it was at that point the doctor said, "Well, your son was born with a rare condition called Eagle-Barrett syndrome, which at the time he was born was 1 in 40,000 births uh,
well,
when he was born." And so I looked at the doctor and said, "And what is that?" And so he kind of gave me a basic sense of what it was, and he says, well, what's going to happen is tomorrow morning the local children's hospital is going to drive down, they're going to come get your son and they're going to transport him up to their hospital because they're better equipped to deal with the issues that we think that your son may have, which from where I am is just across the city, so it wasn't necessarily far. um, and I looked at the doctor and said, well, that's great and wonderful. I said, but his mother has not seen him yet, and you are not taking my son out of this building until my wife is coherent enough to see the child that she just carried for 9 months. And so they were really good about stopping by our room and letting his mother see him, and then they transported him up. From that point forward, he was in the local children's hospital for 12 days. We were at that point, we were assigned 6 different specialist doctors. Um, we had a urologist, a pulmonologist, a nephrologist, a pediatric neurosurgeon, and something else that we all got assigned that within 3 days of being there. But to get that out of the way, I mention all that because what I realize now that I didn't realize then was we were actually grieving in a sense because we were grieving the life that we thought we were going to have versus the life we got. Uh, I didn't realize it in the moment because I was so focused on, well, what's going on with them? What do I need to do? How do I need to provide for them? All that kind of stuff is what happened. So, my son, the easiest way to explain it was my son was born with a rare condition called Eagle-Barrett syndrome. He was also born with neurological delays, meaning at 15 years old, he actually functioned about 7 or 8 years old. He was born with epilepsy. He had 2 different kinds of seizures. He was nonverbal and he could walk with assistance, but like he couldn't walk on his own. So he was essentially wheelchair bound, but like he could army crawl and do things on the floor. He just couldn't walk upright, is not being able to walk. Um, and if you can imagine all that happening, we decided to have another child, which she was born 2 years almost to the day of my son. And we found out 6 months after she was born that she literally was born with everything my son had except for the rare condition. So in the first 4 years or 5 years of our marriage, we had had two kids that were born with multiple medical conditions uh, that most of them we knew about, but the rare condition was a difficult one because we weren't quite sure what all it entailed. So that's kind of how life started out for us. Um, from that point forward, it was my son that was more medically fragile. He was the one that was in and out of the hospital more than his sister. Um, and he was probably in and out of an ICU every 6 months for the first 6 years of his life. Um, from
Well,
from about 6 years old on, we started getting better, and then he had a major like reconstruction surgery, which helped him tremendously. And from that point forward, I think he was 6 or 7 years old when that happened. Um, we went from being in the hospital every 6 months to almost having no hospital stays because of his issues. Um, yeah, and then my daughter's been in and out a little bit of the hospital, but she's definitely the more healthy of the two.
and going right back to pregnancy, when you was finding out with your son that there was these issues that could occur, was there ever a discussion of termination before your son was born, or did you take it face on?
Well, funny you should ask that. When we found out that when my wife took a pregnancy test and we found out she was pregnant, she came home and we were taught we lived somewhere differently back then, but she came into the kitchen and we were talking about it. I mean, we were excited and all, and she asked me, she said, what if we have a child that's got medical needs or issues? What are your thoughts on that? And I said, my response was, well, if we have a child with needs and we just have a child with needs, we'll deal with it as it comes. Which I now can joke about it and say, well, apparently God heard me because he gave me two within 4 years.
Yeah, no, and like you said, like so my background is I'm 20 years working in education. 18 of them have been with special educational needs students. So I've seen the like obviously the caring side of that, but those young people as well bring so much joy.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's the same for your son and daughter. I bet there's things you get to experience as a parent that others don't because of you've got to work out a different route. Like you said, you was expecting parenthood to go one way and it's gone another. So I bet you do have some really special moments, and I bet it does make you stronger as a family.
Yes. My wife and I have made comments many times over the years that some of like my daughter right now is 16 years old, and some of the normal 16-year-old girl stuff that regular parents per se are dealing with that they're pulling their hair out over, we don't necessarily have to deal with, which is, you want your child to function as normal as possible, but amongst the hardness of it, it's kind of a blessing that I don't have to deal with some of those things because my daughter doesn't understand it. She has no interest in it. And so there are some of those bright spots, if you will, when you're dealing with all the trials and tribulation and just the hurdles you have to overcome in this life. Um, and even with my son, when he was around, he was always very happy, always very laid back. He loved people watching. He loved being around other people. Even with as hard as his life was with all of his medical issues, he was probably the most laid back child I've ever come across.
But then, like you said as well, for them as well, it's the norm. So they don't know any different. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's nice to hear that he was very laid back and stuff. What gets you through your bad day? Because I know it's a completely different scenario, but like I said to you off camera,
Mm,
since my wife having a stroke, I always see it as I'm grieving the loss of a person that I used to love. Why
hmm.
trying to fall in love with a new person,
Yep.
but why seeing their face? Because a bit like you, I sort of mourn the past of what life was like to how life is like now. And
Hmm.
I go through stages sometimes. It's a lot less now, but it was very prominent at the start of I haven't signed up to this. I don't know if I could do this. I don't know if I
Hmm.
can spend the next 60 years doing
Yep.
this. and then I'm getting angry with myself for feeling like that as well.
Yep.
Did you ever have moments like that, and how did you combat and cope your way through those days? And do you still have those days?
And yeah, definitely in the beginning, I had a lot of moments where I thought, how in the hell am I going to get through this?
Yep,
What am I going to do? Especially, when my son was born and they told me he had a rare condition, I'd never heard of it. In fact, I had to research it when I finally got home to figure out actually what it completely was. But I'm also a researcher, so when I got home, I got on government websites and I found the national organization and I found people that actually had kids with it. And so that certainly helped me in the beginning to kind of figure out what I'm in for and what it's going to entail and what are the ups and downs of it, just all of the different aspects of it. Um, but to get through it, like I tell people, at least on the special needs side of the journey that I'm on, is, in the beginning, if you've got to have one of those moments where you go out in the garage or go into another room and want to punch a hole through the drywall, that is perfectly normal. That is a natural reaction to you having one life and then all of a sudden it gets completely flipped upside down. And especially from the male point of view,
yep.
probably 99% of us, our first emotion is going to be anger. I mean, it's just how we're built. And but you know, there were days that I would find that, I would try to, when I actually would get a break occasionally, I would try to do things that interest me. I'll be honest, there were probably more days I just had to muscle through the day, is what it came down to. And that just became a habit. And it's been a habit for, let's see, almost 19 years now.
No, I totally agree. So when I spoke to a therapist, he kept telling me to live in the moment, and I kept resisting it. I was like, "But what if the moment's shit?" And then
Mm,
what he was trying to say was, "You can't get back yesterday, good or bad, because you could have had the best day of your life yesterday. But if you did it again, say you went to the beach, the wind could be
mm,
different, and that could change the mood of the
mm.
day." And he said, "You don't know what's coming tomorrow, so don't
Yep,
worry about it." And like
yep,
you said, I've been doing it now for the last 3 years. My day finishes when I go to bed, good or bad, and I wake
mhm,
up the next day and I just take on, and then it makes it more manageable because it's only 24 hours, but we sleep for
mhm,
8. So really, it's only
yep,
16 hours that I've got to manage with, good or bad.
mhm,
And then I can hit the reset button for the
yep,
next day. And
yep,
that's got me through. And like you said, you've been doing it for 19, I've been doing it for 3. And
mhm,
that has really helped. But I was very resistant to it to start with, like you said, because so much anger. I'm just angry at the world, angry
yep.
at everyone. And you know, saying it, I think it hits the nail on the head. It is a male thing. We get angry first, then we
Mhm.
deal with it.
Yep, exactly. Um, you know, um, at first it was anger for me, and then it was kind of your typical male response. Like first it was anger, and then I thought, then right after that, when I kind of got through that, I started thinking as a provider, I go, well, how are we going to financially provide for all this? Because my son's got serious medical issues. And now in the States over here, I have private insurance and then I've got government assistance as well on top of it, which has helped out greatly because my son in his entire life, if I would have had to have paid for it out of pocket, it totaled over $6 million.
Wow,
It was a lot. In fact, the last surgery he had before he passed, that surgery alone was $423,000.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
And how did it affect you and your wife as a partnership? Because, like you said, you've been married so long and stuff, and then again, for both of you, your world's changing to what it would like and what it was expected to be. Was there moments where that nearly tore you apart, or did you just come together as a unit?
Well, I have said to people over the years, and the statistic is a married couple that has one special needs child, the rate of divorce is like 70 or 80%.
Yeah.
And we had two with multiple issues. So the running joke between my wife and I was, well, if one's 80%, does two mean it's like 100%? I mean, is it definite? So, we had our difficult times, but we kind of, you know, the running theory with marriage is it's 50-50. But what I tell people is marriage is not 50-50. It changes day by day, meaning if today I'm 70%, if today my wife is 30% because of some reason, something's got her down, something's got her dragging, then I have to make up the difference. So I'm 70% that day. Now it's not that way every day. She may be 50% the next day and I'm 50%. And then 3 days from then, I may be 10%, she's 90%. So it fluctuates. And that's kind of how it did in kind of this special needs life that we were living in. Um, I always joked with her early on was we've only got room for one of us to have a breakdown. So if you're having a breakdown today, I can't break down. So, and as joking as it is, that's kind of how we lived because we both had our moments at times where it was just difficult. So we honestly played off each other. I think it made us stronger just because it was almost that us against the world mentality.
Yeah, and I know you keep saying you joke about that, but I think humour is a really big coping mechanism for when traumatic things are going on. So I think the fact that you were saying stuff like that to each other, I think is a really good, positive
Mhm.
way to get through things. Um, I just said earlier as well, your son passed. How as well do you go through that? I couldn't. Like, I have two children, and I can't imagine losing a child. How was that for you as well?
Um, well, first of all, it was sudden and unexpected. What he passed from had nothing to do. Now, he had
Right,
5 different issues, and what he passed from had nothing to do with any of them, if you
right,
can imagine that. I mean, up until he passed, like I became a stay-at-home parent for 12 years because of the my kids. It was my wife that was the bread. Plus, it's not that my wife didn't want to be home. She liked working. She didn't mind being the breadwinner, and I was always told I work well with kids anyways. And so it was just a natural transition for me. But I was his 24/7, 365-day a year care for 12 years. Uh, I knew my son well enough with his nonverbal cues and all that that I could tell he was sick before he was sick. I
right.
mean that's how connected we were. The day he passed, that morning, I was the one to take him to the hospital. I actually was in the trauma room from the time he came in there until he was pronounced. I watched the entire process. And so, in the moment, as a man, as sad as it sounds, I had to compartmentalize. I
Yeah.
had I had to observe what was going on. I had to be able to take the information that I got so that I could call his mother and tell her and get her reaction from that, and his grandmother and just all the family members I had to tell. Now, later on that day, yeah, it hit me like a Mack truck. And it was devastating. Um, and even to this day, I still deal with PTSD from it because I witnessed my son die right before my eyes. Um, and when you see something like that or something that traumatic, in the beginning, I didn't think I had it. I didn't think I was dealing with it. But as a little more time went on, a little more time went on, it started kind of coming out. And definitely in the beginning, there was a lot of anger that came out because of that. And I say that because throughout his life, there were a couple of times, different times of different issues where I actually saved his life. And so the idea that this happened again and I couldn't save his life, that was outside of losing my son, that was the huge blow because I was the caregiver. I did all the medical stuff, whether it was physical or hospital or doctors or you name it. So, I mean, probably in that first week, I ran through all 5 stages of grief. The thing about the 5 stages of grief, a lot of people seem to think, well, I hit the first one, which is anger, and I get through anger, and then I'm done with anger, and then I get through sadness, and no, that's not how it works at all. The stages
Yeah.
of grief are very fluid. So let's say they're numbered 1 through 5. Well, on any one day, I might go 1, 2, 4, 5, 3, 1, 4, 2, 1 on any one day, and I will cycle through them many times, especially in that first 6 months, year and a half.
Yeah, and obviously you've come on to this podcast and that. Is this helping you with the grieving process as well to get the information and the story out there to help others?
Sure, certainly. It was the irony is, well, first of all, I'm a big proponent of seeing counselors. I feel like we all at some point have seasons where we need people just that are professionals that we can talk to. And the whole idea of me kind of opening up and talking about was actually her idea. She, right after my son passed, I called her up and said, "Hey, I need an emergency session. I'll explain when I get there." And probably my fourth or fifth session after I'd started seeing her again, she mentioned, she goes, "Have you ever thought about journaling?" And, the irony now is I looked at her and said, I don't know if I'm a real good journaler. I don't know if that's my thing. And she was just like, "Well, you put it on the back burner. It's something you can go to at any time." She's just like, if you write something, you don't have to share it with anybody. You can, but you don't have to. And I'm one of those people that I have to find a way to get it off me versus it just sitting on me. Because otherwise, I'll obsess about it, and that's not good for anybody. Um, and the first journal entry that I actually shared online right before I went to go share it, I paused for a minute and thought, as noble as it is for me to share this as a man, because us men are so great about sharing emotions, it's still the internet, and I may get some negative comments from it. And am I in the headspace to be able to take those negative comments should someone say them? Now, luckily for me, I've had nothing but positive comments the entire time I've done this. And at least at this stage, I'm a little more headstrong. So if someone should say something negative, I'm not going to jump down their throat. Um, but yeah, journaling has certainly helped me. It's helped me to get it out, and it's really helped me when I share it online and someone makes a comment to where they relate to it. For example, the first one I ever shared, I posted it, didn't hear anything most of the day, and then that evening I got a massive response to it. And this one woman direct messaged me and said, "We've never met. I've never told anybody how I feel. I've never shared how I feel deep down inside about the loss of my child. I read your letter and it hit me word for word. This is exactly how I feel." And I said, "Well, I'm thrilled I could write something that would resonate with you. It's inspired by my son. I'm glad it could help." And because of that one comment, if I hadn't have gotten that one comment, we probably wouldn't be talking today.
Yeah, no, I totally get that as well. I was very umming and erring before I hit start on this podcast. It took me 6 months to
Hmm.
actually do it. I had the idea and I kept talking myself out of it. And then I had a really nice comment from someone saying, "Thank you for this. I needed this today." And that just
Hmm.
made it all worthwhile. And like you said, and you will at some point come across it, but the way I deal with the trolls, I just think to myself, their comment pushes my video out to another 6 people, and it's
Yep.
not my family, it's not my friends, so it
Yep.
doesn't matter. If someone I care about said something hurtful, that would bother me. If it's a stranger, okay,
Hmm.
my life continues, their life continues. So
Hmm.
enjoy the rest of your day.
Yep.
So,
Exactly.
well, like I said, you're on social media now. So where can people find you if they want to see your stuff or connect with you?
Uh, at this point, I feel like I'm a little bit of everywhere. I have a professional website. It's letterstozachary.com. Zachary is spelled Zachary. Um, my original first social media was a Facebook page by the same name, Letters to Zachary. I'm also on Instagram, same name, and I'm also on TikTok as the same name. So my website, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok.
And what we'll we'll make sure the links to the social media are in the description so people can get to you quickly. Well,
Sure.
Jason, thank you so much for
Thank
your
you.
honesty and your openness tonight. Before we go, I've got a couple of would you rather, just light-hearted questions
Okay.
we got from a game at Christmas. The first two are, would you rather have everything smell bad forever or have roller skates for feet?
Oh, I'll take the roller skates for feet. I used to skate all the time.
Yeah, same me. I don't like bad smells, so I think. Right, so the next one is, would you rather fight off 20 duck-sized unicorns every time you go to the restroom or have toes for fingers?
Toes for fingers. I could get around that.
Yeah, as we're getting older, we have to go pee a lot in the night and stuff, so it'll
Mhm.
be a lot of fighting, I think. And your last one is, would you rather feel like you are sitting on pins every time you sit down or get bitten by a dog every time you go outside?
The pins. I can deal with that. I can muscle through that.
Well, like I said,
Definitely.
thank you so much for your time. And before we go,
Thank you.
I've got one last question, and this question I ask every guest. If you could
Okay.
be remembered for one word and one word only, what would it be and why?
Oh, wow. Probably determined. And the reason why I say that is when I get focused on something, I'm like 150%. And I'm the type of person that when I'm focused on it, I won't stop till it's done. And so I would probably say determined.
Yeah, and definitely with parts of your story you've told tonight, you've sounded like you're a very determined person and to do the
Mm,
right thing. So, like I said earlier, thank you again for your honesty and your
mhm.
openness. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you.